So this video I'm just going to walk through where things are at with the brine leak and what could potentially be done. So this is the setup that I created for doing the pressure test. This is showing what the pressure is in the brine system right now, so we're just at like 32 psi. Right now I've got the pump running in the refrigeration plant. All isolation valves are open and I'm cooling the floor. So that's 32 psi is what the system sits at when the pump is running. The pump will show 48 psi roughly, but that's because it's reading right at the pump, not the actual line pressure downstream after the friction losses. So these two valves here, those are both fully open. Those isolate the header section from the section of pipe that runs over into the TC brine trench and into the plant. Now I'm going to go over and I'm going to show you where the second set of isolation valves are. So for doing hydrostatic testing, it's ideal to close both sets of valves just to make sure that you're fully isolating the header section from the brine trench. I know from testing that the one set definitely seems to hold, but I didn't want to overdo it, so I closed both sets for pressurizing the system when I took it up to 50 and 60 psi. So in here, this is the other set of valves. So these ones here you can ignore because they were just from the temporary plants. But these ones here, so this is fully open right now. It can be closed fully. You can ignore this one because that's also from the temp plant. This one here, fully open. Close it fully there if you're doing a pressure test. So for doing pressure tests, you want it so that the plant is completely isolated from the brine lines. So doing those two sets of valves, you're basically like doubling up the isolation. So that means you can run the pressure in the floor up to say 60 psi, but if you look at the pressure in the plant room, it'll still be sitting at about 3 psi, which is just the weight of the brine in the balance tank. And then you know it's not being affected. The city water sits in our building at about something like 65, 70 psi. You can check that in the sprinkler room, but essentially that's why I'm using this tap here to apply the pressure through this system here. So there's a valve here and another valve here, both of which are closed right now. You have to keep in mind that when you're doing a pressure test, you're actually taking water from here and you're putting plain water into here. That water that you put into here, it either needs to come out from here, which you can do if you have to, but typically what's happening is that water's going into the system as you pressure test. Some of it will be leaking out wherever your weak spots are, and some of it is going to go back into the balance tank. So the first time that I did it, I had about 30 gallons, go into the balance tank. The second time that I did, I had about 20 gallons go into the balance tank, and the reason it was less on the second time is that because of the it was less because there was leaking happening. So the reason I've got the laptop out here is I'm currently cooling the floor and I just want to watch the suction pressure. I'm trying to maintain 28 psi on the suction pressure. Brine temperature, so we're down to 12.8. Can reduce feel the pipes getting a little bit cooler. The ambient air temperature in here is up around in the 20s, and that's because it's been fairly warm the last couple days. So you can see the state of the concrete's in pretty rough shape. The bright colored clamps are the repairs done yesterday. There's another 2 that still need to be repaired. I've put these on all the ones that are of suspect or of interest, so you can see a little bit of moisture here, tiny little leak there happening, and that's just from this morning's pressure test. This one was leaking, one of the ones I repaired yesterday, and needed a little bit more work. It seems to be holding now, but it might still be suspect. This one here, there was a broken clamp on it, replaced that and tighten them up. And then this one here with the dustpan under it. You can see there's one little drip in the dustpan and a bit of discoloration around the weld, so we might need to have repair done there. But that's all with the pressure test at 60 psi, so that's almost double what our normal operating temperature is, or operating pressure is. So this is what you get to see on the thermal imaging camera. This here is where it's seeing the infrared. This is showing the actual picture of what you're looking at. You can adjust this dial to change, essentially to calibrate it. And so you can see the, when I point it further out, the colors will change pretty quickly, because if you look here, the very top number, so 120 is the most it's seeing, with 16 being the lowest temperature it's seeing. So right now, you see the whole screen is pretty much blue with that little red dot. Well, that little red dot is the heater down at the other end. And whatever your crosshairs are over, that reads right here. So if you put your crosshairs over the heater, you see it says calibrating, because it's trying to adjust for that huge temperature difference between the heater's probably actually at over 200 degrees, but it's only able to show a maximum window here, and I'm pretty far away from it. Anyways, important thing to know, red is warm, blue is cold, and the gradient here is always going to be variable based on the warmest and the coldest thing in your view. So, and you'll get reflections of heat off of things. You'll get reflections of heat from yourself, your shadow. You'll get reflections of heat from the beams as the floor cools down. So when the ice was in, I could actually see where the beams were, and I could see these wires and things like that in the reflection on the ice, because those were basically reflecting off the ice surface. So it's possible to change it to show just the IR image and nothing else, which when you look at some things, if there's no temperature difference, you really don't see much. You see a much narrower range here, right, like 23 to 18. You can adjust to calibrate it, but like if you get the right angle, so right now you can essentially see the brine lines, and if I calibrate this, so right now I'm adjusting the calibration, and you see it kind of washes it out if I turn it too far one way, and if I turn it too far the other way, it washes it out in the other direction. So it either goes full red, full blue. So ideally you want to just slowly tune that. So now you can see the brine lines. And so that's a pretty fine distinction that it's making right now, because basically now it's showing me the concrete where it's colder versus where it's warmer. And as I point the crosshairs from one spot to another, so you can see what 19.567 versus there 19.0, 18. You know, it's pretty minor differences that it's showing. The question is whether this is going to be possible to see. So the brine lines are sitting on 4-inch centers roughly. If you look at it here, you can see the lines. We're probably going to need it to get a lot colder before it's possible to see if there's an area that's outside the lines, and it's such a small leak that I don't know if that's even gonna register on this camera. So I'm gonna have to play with this throughout the day as the floor cools. You know, we're still at plus 12 degrees. Once the brine gets down to you know, 0 or below, it should be a lot easier to see the lines and hopefully see something outside the lines. Hopefully that's helpful. You know, you point the camera at something like this, you can really see big differences, and this is what it looks like. Oh, that's interesting. Oh no, okay, that's the metal. I was like, why is it so hot right there? I thought there was a plugged brine line, but it was actually just this piece of metal right here that was showing up so warm. I thought maybe we didn't have flow through one of the lines. So, you know, plastic on the lines is still at 15 degrees. The brine inside the lines is maybe at 12 right now. So you're going to see a pretty big difference. I think as the floor gets colder, hopefully on the cement. In terms of what we're looking at doing with the threshold, we're thinking, because there's been so many leaks here historically, like you can see, like all these old repairs that have already been done in years past, like here and here and there. So this has already got several spots that are all right along this this front edge of the threshold, and that's because well, this threshold's historically always been an issue. These grates sit on top of the threshold. They carry the full weight of the machine every time it drives on and off the ice, and originally there was nothing here. This was just open, and these were digging into the concrete all the time. So several years ago, or maybe even 10 years ago or something, I welded these pieces of angle iron on top of here so that the weight would be distributed and they wouldn't dig into the concrete. And then I also put this piece of angle iron here on top of the concrete to help protect it. Mike was always repairing the concrete, and tried a few times to get someone else to come in and do it professionally, but never had any luck with that. So he was always just repairing it himself. And I thought it was supposed to get dealt with during the LCM, but that didn't happen. And then this is where we're at. So thinking is, if we basically take out all this concrete that's already loose, like this looked pretty rough when the ice was in, and I knew we needed to repair it when the ice came out. But once the ice was out and all this was no longer frozen, because this was still frozen before, it basically just went from, you know, like you can see there's lots of loose pieces here, but just the process of the ice coming out, a lot of this concrete came out already, and you can see, like, you know, just how easy it is to remove it. It's a lot of it's pretty destroyed. So So I think in order to do this properly, what we need to do, cut out this piece of steel here and down there, remove this centerpiece, which is easy because it just unbolts. And then, so once this is cut out, I'm not sure, hopefully there'll be some kind of line, but if not, then it might just be making a really shallow cut across the front edge, pretty much where the yellow plastic is. Shallow enough that we would still be staying above this plastic sleeve that's here. And then after making that cut, we would carefully be excavating all the loose unconsolidated concrete off the top, completely remove all the top layer of concrete by hand with chisels and drill with a small pneumatic chisel, or not pneumatic, anyways, small hammer drill. Anyways, clean all that concrete up, and then I think it'd be worthwhile to replace all these sleeves. So like this one here, where's the mark? Yeah, this one here. You can see tiny little leak on this side. Pretty much, so all the leaks we had exposed yesterday were all on the same side of the pipe. Here, there, and I'm assuming that all the ones that haven't leaked yet will at some day fail in the future. So the thinking is proactively replace them. So cut them all, redo the sleeves, the concrete, and repair them all with fresh fittings like this with sealant on it. Buy the best quality clamps we can. Replace all the old clamps with new ones. So like you can see spots like this where you can see that there's some leaking happening here. This one, the clamp was bad. I put a new clamp on there, but just basically like get rid of all these old rusty clamps, put all fresh clamps on everywhere. Depending on what we can find, maybe even put new sections of pipe from here to here so that this part is replaced, because we've already got a lot of spots like this where there's already a joint here. Like just get rid of the joints, clean it up with new pipe, and then we would end up with clamps basically all along this edge. And hopefully that would be essentially fixing the leaks before they happen later on. And then fresh concrete, steel back in, and see if we can get it to hold pressure. That's current thinking on what we might want to do for a game plan. The infrared might show us something, but if there is a leak in the floor, it might be small enough that it's not going to show up, or maybe it's going to have to be done with the professional's camera, because he might have a better camera than ours. So cost of that is about a little over $5K. I've been told there's another company that we could have quote on it, but they're out of Edmonton, so likely they'll be even higher. That's where it's at, and I'll keep you posted once I have more info.